Hi, reception. Story time. You have worked so hard this week. It is Friday. That means it is the weekend tomorrow. So I thought we would end on one of my favourite stories, Mrs. Wobble, the waitress. Mrs. Wobble, the waitress. There's Mrs. Wobble, and there's Master Wobble and Miss Wobble. And it says on the blurb, Mrs. Wobble loves her job as a waitress, but oh dear, there's one big problem. She wobbles, and when she wobbles and drops jelly everywhere, it's time for a new job. Luckily, Mr. Wobble and the Wobble children have a clever plan. Shall we see what their clever plan is? Mrs. Wobble was a waitress. She liked her work. The customers liked her. The only trouble was, she wobbled. One day, Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a heavy bowl of soup. The soup landed on the customer's dog. Mrs. Wobble got told off. The next day, Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a roast chicken. The roast chicken landed on a customer's head. Mrs. Wobble got told off again. The next day, Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a plate of jelly. The jelly landed on the manager's head. Mrs. Wobble got the sack. Mrs. Wobble went home to her family. Mr. Wobble cooked her tea. The children tried to cheer her up. "Cheer up, Ma," they said. "You'll find another job in another cafe." There's Mrs. Wobble. But there were no other cafes. That was the only one in the town. Mrs. Wobble knew this. "There are no other cafes," she said, and she began to cry. The children did not like to see their mother cry. It made them cry. It made their father cry too. Then Mr. Wobble had an idea. "I know what we can do," he said. "We can open a cafe of our own." "Where?" said Mrs. Wobble. "Where?" said Miss Wobble. "Where?" said Master Wobble. "Here," said Mr. Wobble. "We can turn the house into a cafe." The next day, the Wobble family turned their house into a cafe. They cleaned and painted. They moved the chairs and tables around. They changed the curtains. They've been very busy. Look how different it looks. Mr. Wobble went shopping. He bought meat and vegetables, fruit and fish, cheese and chicken, flour and a few other things. The children went shopping too. They bought 2 pairs of roller skates and a fishing net. "What are those for?" said Mr. Wobble. "It's a surprise, Pa," the children said. "You wait and see." In the evening, Mrs. Wobble made the waiter's clothes for her children and a cook's hat for her husband. Mr. Wobble and the children made the menus. "How do you spell sausage?" "Keep still." So the Wobble's Cosy Cafe, they had soup, meat and veg, pies, fish, puddings, jellies, cakes, fruit, pots of tea and cheese. All those foods. Lovely. The children went to bed. Mr. and Mrs. Wobble stepped outside. They looked at their new cafe. "It's the big day tomorrow," Mr. Wobble said. "We're going to make our fortunes." "Yes," said Mrs. Wobble. "The only trouble is, what if I wobble?" The next day, the children woke up early. "It's the big day today, Ma," Master Wobble said. He gave his mother a cup of tea in bed. Miss Wobble gave her father a cup of tea in bed. "We're going to make our fortunes today, Pa," she said. After breakfast, Mr. Wobble began cooking. Mrs. Wobble and Miss Wobble laid the tables. Master Wobble went round town with a sandwich board. The first customers arrived. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Wobble. "What if I—" Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a bowl of soup. "Help," said the customer. Miss Wobble skated to the rescue. She caught the soup in another bowl. "That's clever," the customer said. Mrs. Wobble wobbled with a roast chicken. "Wow," said the customer as Master Wobble skated to the rescue. He caught the roast chicken in a net. "Hooray," the customer said. Then all of the other customers cheered. "Hooray, hooray! This is more fun than the circus." Oh, look how many people are at their cafe. Wow. That night, Mrs. Wobble counted the money. "It looks like a fortune to us, Ma," the children said. Mr. Wobble gave them a hug. "And we owe it all to the famous juggling waiters," he said. The next day, there was a big crowd in the street. The people had come from miles around to see the famous juggling waiters. The children peeped out. There was a big crowd in the street. "Ma," they said. "Yes," said Mrs. Wobble, and she began to laugh. "Now the only trouble is, what if I don't wobble?" Oh, I love that story. Mrs. Wobble, the waitress. Have a lovely weekend reception, and I will see you on Monday. Bye.